Welcome to episode 1 of making a Halo ODST cosplay. Let's go.
Alright everyone, welcome back to the channel. It's been a minute. If you're new here, hello. This is going to be the first episode of making a full Halo ODST cosplay, which I was commissioned to make, and I thought it'd be interesting to take you through the process from start to finish, so yeah, let's get into it. The first step is to print everything. I'm not including that in the video because there is plenty of videos online on how to get all your print settings dialed in and scale your armor and all that stuff. This is purely just going to be the build video. Cool, so the first step is to assess all your pieces and see what needs to be filled, like beyond just filler primer. There'll be some parts that will have like support scarring, and maybe you'll have some filled prints that you kind of just want to fix in post. Alright, so once the assessments are done, we're going to grab some 150 grit sandpaper or something quite rough, and we're going to go over those supported areas or any kind of bits that you think need to be smoothed before adding filler. Once you're happy with the amount of sanding and smoothing that you've done, it's time to grab your filler of choice. I'm going to be using some car body filler to start with, and then some UV resin for some other areas. If you're like me and you haven't used your car body filler in a while, make sure to give it a mix because it might have separated. We don't want to have any problems with the curing at this stage because then you'll ruin everything from then on. It's important to have everything laid out that you're going to add the filler onto, because once you mix the part A and B together, the filler is going to cure pretty quickly, so preparing your parts minimizes that wastage. You can see I'm mixing part A and B here, and what I'm looking for is to have a consistent color. I don't want to be seeing any red or beige streaks through this filler. It needs to be one solid color, which will prevent any curing problems again. We're then going to apply the filler to the selected areas and making sure we're giving like a nice thick layer, not too much because we are going to have to sand this, but we don't want it to be too thin where the plastic is still showing through. Kind of want to create like a nice smooth layer over the top, which we can then smooth down and refine once it's hardened. Here I'm just showing you how I use my UV resin to also do the filling. I use these usually on parts that have deeper grooves from support scarring and stuff like that. So using an old brush, I'm just gonna dip into the resin and apply it to the surface, and then I'm gonna grab my UV torch and cure it for a couple of seconds, like a minute, and that should be enough. It should go without saying, but please make sure you're using the right PPE when you're handling resin and car body filler, because it's nasty stuff, it's not good for you, so yeah, just glove up, get that respirator on, and should be all good. Alright, now it's time to sand, everyone's favorite. So we're going to come out and we're going to grab some 240 grit sandpaper or something like kind of rough, but not too rough. And I'm going to go ahead and wet sand the surfaces and make sure they're just generally smooth. Now what we're looking for here is to remove the high spots, but leave a thin layer of the filler, which will do the job of filling those layer lines. You don't want to sand off too much because then you're going to undo your filling job, and you'll just have to put the filler back on and wait for it to cure and sand it off again. So you can see in the footage I'm going over all the parts that I've used body filler on, and I'm just using the wet sanding on 240 grit to get all those smoothed out. Whilst we watch this beautiful B-roll, if you haven't already, leave a like. If you've got any questions, comment it below, and drop a follow if you haven't already. Moving on to the areas that I filled with UV resin, I'm going to use a lower grit sandpaper, about 180, just because the resin is tougher to sand than the body filler. So I'm just going to go ahead and wet sand all the surfaces that have UV resin on them, and that shouldn't take you too long, just because UV resin usually settles into a quite uniform shape when you've applied it. The main thing we're trying to get rid of is that tacky layer that can be left over after you've cured the UV resin, because that will affect the paint layers on top, including the primer and the filler primer and all that stuff. So you want to really make sure that there's no tackiness left over. Next, I'm going to assemble the shins. So these are printed in two parts, like a top and bottom. Now, I don't know if I did something wrong, but when I printed these, they wouldn't fit together, so I had to use a coping saw and kind of cut off one of these little fins. And I did that on both, but after I did that, they fit together just fine. When you're ready to glue, I would recommend roughing up the surface that you're going to apply the glue on. This just gives the super glue or whatever glue you're going to use something to adhere to and kind of really bite into the surface. You don't have to do much, just like a light sand with some low grit sandpaper will do, just to give the surface some imperfection. I'm going to be using the Zapagap medium CA glue, as well as the Zapagap Zip Kicker. Zip Kicker is a CA glue accelerator. It smells really bad, so please wear gloves and wear a respirator, as well as being in a well ventilated room. The gloves are important because as soon as it's on a surface, it smells like this kicker for ages, and I can tell you from experience, it's not pleasant. Also, be mindful that as soon as the zip kicker surface and the CA glue surface meet, they will instantly bond because it's a chemical reaction, so you have to line it up pretty perfectly straight away. You can see that in the video here. Once I've joined the two parts, I'm applying some firm pressure to make sure that super glue is really bonding, and then I'm just going to set it aside and do the same thing on the other shin. Where we've just joined those two parts, there can be a little bit of a ridge, so we're going to get some rough sandpaper and just smooth it out. I printed everything in PLA+, so sanding ridges like this can be a little bit tricky, so I kind of got to put quite a lot of effort into it. If you sand with ASA or PETG, those results may be different for you. When you're happy with the amount of sanding you've done, we're going to fill those little gaps in with some more body filler, and this just follows the same process as last time. Mix your part A and B until it's a smooth color, and apply it to the surface in kind of a thick-ish layer, not too thick because we are going to have to sand it down. Unfortunately, the camera stopped recording, I didn't hear it, and I was filming the process of gluing this back panel together and using the Dremel to melt the plastic together almost as a weld. People have done this with soldering irons as well, so you can do it soldering iron or a Dremel, whatever works for you, whatever you have. But again, I'm just going to use some car body filler and fill in that seam on the back. And I'm going quite a thick layer for this one because there's quite a big ridge. I do plan on using a disc sander on this to kind of level that out a little bit more. The next and final part of this video is to add the first layer of filler primer onto as many parts as you can. I'm only going to apply it to parts that I have either not added any filler on or I've sanded down the filler already. We don't want to be adding filler primer over the filler that hasn't been sanded because you're then just going to be wasting your filler primer. With this coat and the next coat of filler primer, we want to add quite a thick layer. We're doing this because we want to build up the paint to a higher level than the physical 3D object. This means that when we sand down the paint, it's going to bring the peaks of the paint down to the level of the 3D object, and then we'll achieve a smooth finish. As the rest of this footage plays, that is the end of the video. Thanks so much for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed, please leave a like. If you've got any questions, comment down below. And if you haven't already subscribed for more of these episodes, I'm hoping to get this build done fairly quick. I'm juggling it with a part-time job as well, so we will see. And the weather is also not great in Scotland right now, so trying to find good days to do some more spray painting. But other than that, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.